Hi everyone, Orlando Morgado here, Sculpture Shop Supervisor, and this is the virtual stretcher making demo. So today you guys are going to learn how to make stretcher frames with all of the tools and materials that we provide for you here in the Sculpture Shop. And before we get started, I'm going to point out the University Shop rules, which are posted all over the Sculpture Shop and all over every other shop in the university, which you should review and be aware of whenever you are coming to work in the shop.
So these are the University Shop rules, the ones that apply the most relevantly to the Sculpture Shop are the ones that have to do with safety equipment and proper attire. So for example, long hair must be contained and pulled back tightly, long beards must also be contained, all jewelry including rings, necklaces, bracelets, etc. must be removed, no open-toed shoes may be worn, long pants, safety glasses are going to be worn essentially at all times, no food or drink. And then there's some that are more about splash goggles and things like that that are more lab related, but generally speaking, this is going to be the first thing you want to check when you come to work. Make sure that you're complying with all this stuff. And if you're not sure what to do about any of this or some of this, just ask me and I'll help you figure it out.
So once you get to the shop and you figure out your safety gear situation, you make sure you're properly attired and you've eaten and drunk, etc., you can get ready to start working. So you can come to the back of the Sculpture Shop, which is where the stretcher making area is, and everything you need to do the job is in this area. So I'm going to give you guys a tour of the area so you can see what is where.
So the first thing you're going to notice is that there is wood here. This wood is white, and this wood on the top of this rack is not colored, it's just the natural color of the wood. You'll notice that the white wood is rectangular, and this is what's called 1x2. This other wood here, this is what's called quarter round. If you look at the profile of the wood, you're gonna notice that it is basically 1/4 of a circle, which is why it's called quarter round. It's a quarter of essentially dowel stock, which is just round stock. So this is the basic lumber that you'll be using to make your stretcher frames. You'll also notice that over here to the left-hand side of the lumber rack, there is a scrap bin. This scrap bin is a good first stop when you get to the shop to look for material that you can use that people may have made too much of when they were making their stretcher frames, because oftentimes you'll have some material left over. So this can save you some time when you're working. Other things that you want to know about are over here. So this is the main place that you're going to come to get all of your tools. So there's glue bottles, there's safety glasses, there's hand tools up here that you're going to need for different steps. We're going to be talking about pretty much all of these at some point in our demo. Hammer back there, squares, L squares. Then you're going to notice that there are power tools here. So we have different types of pneumatic nailers, staplers, and then all the way at the bottom, assorted pneumatic tools. You're also going to notice that way down at the bottom, there's a milk crate full of these funky brown triangles, which we're also going to need while we work. So there's your gear. You'll also notice that over here there are big tables. So when you guys come into work, feel free to use these. Now, you can use any tables in the shop while you're working, but generally speaking, this back area of the shop is what is set up for stretcher making. It's kind of a dual use space that's used for the sculpture classes as well as stretcher making, but everything you need to make stretchers is here so that you don't need to really wander around and look for stuff in other parts of the shop. That said, if you do not find things that you're looking for here, you can also look in the tool room, which is down the hall that way on the left-hand side, first door, or you can ask me. So before we get really far, I'm gonna show you guys examples of stretcher frames so that you have some idea of what we're actually doing. So this is a finished canvas, and this is essentially what your end product is gonna be after you do the entire process. Now, when we look at these, you can notice a few things. Number one, the canvas is stretched over the stretcher frame, and it's got some tension. Other things that we're gonna notice is that on the back, they used staples to attach them. In this particular example, this person used a lot of staples. You don't need to use nearly this many, but you can. And then you're gonna notice that underneath here, there's wood, and you're gonna notice these brown triangles. So what does that actually look like when you're making just bare stretcher frames? So this is kind of an idea, except there are some mistakes here. So right now you might not be able to tell right away what the mistake is, but as we're working, you're gonna be able to figure it out. What you'll notice is that the stretcher frame is made of a piece of 1x2, which is this piece of wood here. Now these 1x2s, these are just natural wood, they're not primed. Unlike our 1x2s, which are white, the reason ours are primed is because the primed 1x2 warps less, so it's better for stretcher making. And then you're gonna notice that there's the quarter round. So you're attaching quarter round to 1x2, except this person, they attach the quarter round facing the wrong way. So you can see when you look at these corners that there's a rounded off edge and that the high point is inside the canvas. It's not all the way at the far edge. So as they say here, don't put your quarter round on like this. Mistake stretcher. So that's backwards. The reason is that with a canvas like this, you're gonna notice that the canvas is stretched all the way to the outer edge. And in order for that to work, you need to have the quarter round facing the other way. So for stretcher making purposes, this is what you want your quarter round in 1x2 to look like. You want the curved part to be curving outward this way, and you want the back to be flush. So you want your quarter round and your 1x2 to make a parallel flat wall that goes all the way down the length. And that's how you're gonna turn up with a good stretcher frame. So we have another mistake here. This is actually a common mistake. You'll notice that somebody nailed through the canvas. What they actually did was they kind of did two mistakes at once. One mistake is using nails to attach the canvas to the stretcher frame as opposed to staples. The other is that the nails they used are really long. So they not only went through the canvas, they went completely through the wood, completely through the stretcher frame and shot out the front. So when this person did this, they nailed the entire canvas to the bench top and it was stuck. So we don't want to do that. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to come over to this lumber rack and you're going to need to grab one piece of 1x2 and one piece of quarter round. They're both 8 feet long when they're full pieces. And when you select a piece of 1x2, you're going to want to scrutinize it a little bit. Any piece of 1x2 may not necessarily be what you want. For the purposes of stretcher making, you need the stretcher bars to be straight. So what you should do is you should pull a piece of 1x2 off of the lumber rack and you should look down the length of the piece of wood. When you do this, this is going to cause a foreshortening effect that's going to make it very apparent if there is any warpage or curvature in the piece of wood. So you can see when we look this way, there's a little tiny bit of curvature, but nothing we can't work with. This is actually a pretty good piece of wood to use. And when it comes to the quarter round, it really doesn't matter because the quarter round is very flexible. And so that's gonna do whatever your 1x2 is doing. So since this is going to be nailed to your 1x2, as you can see, this flexes quite a lot. It's gonna basically follow the lead of the 1x2. So you get one piece of 1x2 that's 8 feet long and one piece of quarter round that's 8 feet long. And that you put out on the table, and that's where you start. So first and foremost, you're gonna wanna get a pair of safety glasses, super essential. You're gonna wanna get a bottle of glue. Any of the bottles of glue that are here will work. They're all pretty much the same thing. You might see some Elmer's, but that's all, it's fine. Titebond or Elmer's. Any glue that's in the shop basically is gonna be good to use for wood. So, of the other stuff that's up here right now, for this step, we're gonna want tape measure, and you'll probably need something to write with and or erase with because you're gonna need to make marks on your wood. So you're gonna be measuring and making marks. Then, other things that are here, there's the nailers and the staplers. So let's talk about these nailers first. So the top two shelves are for nailers, and the very top shelf is for big nailers. When we say big nailers, what we mean is that they are not only physically larger than the small nailers on the shelf below, but they also use a different size hardware. So the nails that they shoot are different. They're bigger and they are broader. So big nailers we're gonna be using later. For now, you wanna start with this shelf here. We're gonna be using the small nailers first. Now there's a couple of different models of these. We're gonna deal with the DeWalt because that's what's here. And we're just gonna take a nailer and we're gonna need some nails. So the nails are on the same shelf as the nailers. So the appropriate nails for those nailers are on the same shelf that the nailers live on. Now I can guarantee you that there will be times when these shelves will be disordered, especially if it's very busy and lots of people are working. So you will find nailers on the wrong shelves. If you're ever not sure about what nailer or what nail to use, just feel free to ask me. So you'll notice also that those nails that are on those shelves, they come in different lengths. So for the nails for the small nailer, you could theoretically load them with either the shorter ones, which are 1 inch, or the longer ones, which are 1 1/4 inch. You'll also notice that the big nails, they come in longer sizes, and they also come in a couple of different lengths as well. So, but they are similar in length to the longer nails for the small nailer. Now, the way that you can tell for sure whether you've got the nails for the small nailer or the big nailer is that if you look really closely, you'll notice that the nails for the big nailer, which are these back here, are wider. The nails themselves are wider than the nails for the small nailer, which are here. So they use an industry standard measurement for these called gauge. So the nails for the small nailer are 16 gauge. I'm sorry, the nails for the small nailer are 18 gauge and the nails for the big nailer are 16 gauge. So before we get into loading the nailer and figuring out where the nails go and things like that, let's just talk a little bit about what a pneumatic nailer is and sort of how you should be treating this tool. So this tool is basically kind of a workaround to having to use a hammer and nails. It's very convenient and it shoots nails with a lot of force very fast. There's the small yellow bit that's at the front end of the nailer here. That's the safety. You'll notice there's a trigger back here. If you pull the trigger, that safety is going to move forward. and that is there to prevent you from being able to shoot a nail while the nailer is not in contact with the surface.
So I couldn't take this nailer and just point it across the room and shoot a nail. It's not going to work.
That means that if you want this nailer to shoot a nail, it's got to actually be pressing down against a piece of wood, and you have to press down firmly, because if you press loosely, when you pull the trigger, it's still going to release the safety and it's not going to shoot. So the nailer will only shoot if it's pressed very firmly against a piece of wood, and then when you pull the trigger, it will release and fire.
That being said, there are definitely some things that I don't want to do and that I do want to do whenever I'm using a nailer. So the very first thing is that once you're handling a pneumatic nailer, you're going to want to get a pair of safety glasses, put them on, and essentially forget you have them on. You're just going to keep them on for the entire process. The second thing is that there are right and wrong things to do when handling a nailer. So for example, when you're holding a nailer, you want to make sure that you're working over a supported surface. In our case, we're going to be nailing together a piece of 1/4 round and 1x2 that are somewhat precarious. So I want to make sure that I'm trying to shoot a nail into a curved surface. And I want to make sure that when I'm doing that, the nailer doesn't slip. So my tendency is going to be to want to hold the wood. So I have to be careful when I'm doing that I'm not holding the wood and shooting a nail right where my hands are. So I don't want to do this. I don't want to take a piece of wood and hold it up and hold the nailer and shoot the nails like this. I don't want to point the nailer at myself or at anybody else who's working in the room. I don't want to shoot pointing up. So you have to basically keep in mind that the length of the nail, that nail can shoot through your wood, even if you're aiming properly. It can hit a knot in the wood, be diverted, and shoot out of the side of the piece of wood. It can just completely clear the wood and bounce off of the table and fly around the room. It can kind of go anywhere. So you always have to think of everything that's in a straight line from the nailer this way. Basically, you're pointing a gun, and theoretically, something could just shoot straight out of there and hit something anywhere within your line of sight. So when you're walking around with the nailer, you always want to kind of hold it down and be mindful of where it's pointing and be aware of the people around you while you're working.
So general safety on the nailer out of the way, let's go ahead and get to loading the nailer. So there's your nailer. And right now you've got the safety as we talked about. The nail shoots out from right in front of the safety. Your trigger is over here. There's a setting here, this small knob. This setting is going to control the function of the nailer. It's got two different functions. You always want it pointing up towards the single nail. You've got this area here. There's a built-in pencil sharpener, yay. At the back of the nailer is the area where you plug it into the air supply, which we'll talk about shortly. And in here, this is the area where the nails go. So right now that's locked and closed. So in order to unlock that and open it so you can put nails in it, there is a button here that you press and hold, and then you pull this back. And that's the area where the nails go. This is also a good time to check for jams. Places where you're going to see jams are going to be primarily right up here. If there's a jam inside this nailer, you're going to usually see a small bit of metal that's kind of twisted up that's going to be stuck there. If that happens, let me know and I'll show you how to clear it, or I'll clear it if it's really bad. So this nailer's clear. It just needs nails. So I'm going to take my nails. So here's my small nails for my small nailer. The 1 inch length. So there's 1 inch, 1 1/4. We want 1 inch nails for this step. And you're going to notice that these nails have heads. If you look down the length of the nail, the head is facing up. Looks kind of like a very tall letter T. So I want the heads facing up that way. And I'm going to put these all the way in the front and all the way at the bottom. Meaning, as opposed to something like this, If you try to do that, you can actually get the nailer to close that way. It's more likely to jam when the nail is not all the way at the bottom. And of course, if you load the nails from the big nailer into the small nailer, you can get it closed, maybe. It may close properly. It may get stuck. If it does close properly, it's gonna jam the second you shoot a nail. So once the nails are there, then you take this thing in the back and you have to very firmly push these two parts together. It's gonna click. So that's the way you do that. So that is a loaded nailer. So one more step and this nailer is ready for use. And also, once it is ready for use, it requires more diligence because once it's plugged in, then you have to be extra careful with it. So once you have a loaded nailer, the next thing you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna go ahead and plug it in. So in order to do that, you're gonna need to find an air supply. So this sort of magenta colored hose is one of the air supplies. There's also sort of yellow spring shaped sort of squiggly hoses that are all over the shop that you can also use. There's air supplies all over the shop. So if you see one, you can use it. The main thing to remember is that after you're done, make sure you wrap it back up. So once you've got your nailer and your air supply, you're going to basically have to attach these two things together. Get ready for the most difficult part of the entire stretcher making process, which is attaching this hose, this nozzle to this hose. So this is the hose that you have to attach. And you're gonna notice that there is, inside of here, there are these little ball bearings, and there's this collar. This collar rotates. You're also gonna notice that there is a small pin right there that's kind of chrome colored. Now, this collar, when it's pushed up that way, it keeps those ball bearings engaged so that they're gripping inward. And in order to attach the nailer to this, you need to disengage those ball bearings so that they can go over this ridge that is on the nozzle end here. Now, some of these, they have a joint here. This is normal. This is just for flexibility while you're using it so that the hose and the nailer don't sort of impede each other's movements. So you can kind of disregard that. But right here, there's this ridge, and you've got to get those ball bearings to grab over the top of that ridge. Now, in order to do that, you have to pull this collar back, which means that you have to line up this gap in this collar with this pin, and then you can pull back. Now, it's spring loaded, so it will release on its own, which means that you have to hold it with a couple of fingers, align it, pull back, and then you're gonna have to hold it like this while you then get your nailer and you line these two things up. Now, there's air pressure going through this hose, 100 PSI. So when I try to put these things together, there's a good possibility that if they aren't lined up perfectly, they're going to make a loud hiss. So I'm gonna pull back. I did that perfectly, so it didn't make a loud hiss. And then I'm going to push up. So once I've done that, now these things are attached and we're ready to go. So when I want to take it off, I have to do the same thing in reverse. I have to make sure they're lined up. I have to make sure that the pin and the gap in the collar line up. I have to make sure that I'm holding this hose, very important, and that I'm holding the nailer. So I have to be careful when I do this that I don't just have this laying on a table and then I detach the hose, because if I do that, the air pressure in here is going to make the nailer go flying. So I want to make sure that I have a good hand on the nailer and that I'm not holding it by the trigger. So I'm holding it, and I want to make sure that I grab these two things, line them up, hold tightly, and when I detach them, it's going to make a loud pop. So that's how you attach and detach. Now, I made that look easy because I do it all the time. Common things you're going to see is you're going to try to attach these things. You're going to get a lot of that. So if you're getting that, they're not going to plug in together correctly. You're going to want to hear that. and then you click it up and it's good to go. So even though this collar is spring loaded, when these two things are attached, it won't automatically push itself back up. It'll stay down, so you're gonna have to assist it. So the process is basically sort of 3 steps. So pull back is 1, push together is 2, push up is 3. Okay? I'll do that again. Pull back, 1. Push together, 2. Push up, 3. So when you're actually ready to work, this is what you're gonna have. You're gonna have a piece of 1x2 and a piece of 1/4 round. You're gonna have a bottle of glue. You're gonna have a tape measure, which you won't really need too much for this step, but have it out anyway, because if you are working with a piece of scrap and you're not sure the length of it, you might wanna have it handy anyway. You're definitely gonna need it in the next step. And you're gonna wanna have your pneumatic nailer loaded with the correct nails and plugged in. So this is your initial setup. So the next thing that we're gonna do is we are going to take glue and we're gonna put it on the 1x2 at the top edge. We're gonna go all the way down the entire length. So take your glue bottle and you open it, and you wanna just do a single continuous line of glue. Less is more. If you have too much glue, everything is just gonna be kind of slipping around and making a mess and getting stuck on everything. So you're basically just gonna squeeze the glue bottle and get some glue on this edge and go all the way down. So that's about what you want to turn up with. It's actually too much on the end there, so I would just take a damp paper towel and just wipe off some excess there, and just a continuous line all the way down. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our 1/4 round and we're going to put it on top of the 1x2. And when we do this, super, super, super important, make sure that the curved part of the 1/4 round is facing towards you, facing that way. So you want the curve going against the flat part of the 1x2. And you want the back to be flat and flush, meaning that you do not want either piece to be proud of the other, like sticking out further than the other. You want both pieces flat and parallel, making a continuous taller wall along the back. Now, super important, when you get here, you're committed to this now. You only have a few minutes before the glue dries, and you're going to have to use the pneumatic nailer to nail this 1/4 round to this 1x2 before the glue dries. So you want to make sure when you get to this step, you're not going to be interrupted. You're not going to need to take a break or do anything. So make a note of that. So from this point on, we can start nailing. So just to get things started, as you guys can probably see, the 1/4 round is not exactly as straight as the 1x2. So I'm gonna have to kind of finagle it as I go and make sure the pieces are staying parallel. The first thing I wanna do to make my life easier is I wanna just get 3 nails in here, one at one end, one in the middle, and one at the other end, just to keep them from moving around too much. So I'm using my fingers to make sure that I'm feeling to see that the pieces are flush. And I have to be extra careful when I do this, that when I'm shooting my first nail, I'm supported by the bench top and that I'm shooting away from where my hand is. So I'm gonna hold all the way at the edge, but I'm gonna shoot the nail in a couple of inches so that I don't have to worry about getting the nail to shoot into my hand instead of into the wood. So you have to press down firmly, and here's the tricky bit. You're trying to get the safety to press down firmly on a curved surface, so it's likely to want to slip off. The other thing you have to watch out for is leaning the nailer this way or this way, any kind of lean, or even this way, that lean is going to make it more likely that the nail is going to shoot out of the back of the piece of wood or deflect off of the curve of the quarter round and then just sort of bite into the 1x2 maybe. So be careful, make sure it's lined up straight and vertical. And then you shoot a nail. So there's one, then I'm going to go roughly to the middle. And again, I'm going to hold, I'm going to feel with my fingers and make sure the pieces are flush, but I'm going to get my hand out of the way. One there, and I'm going to go to the other end and I'm going to do the same thing. At this point, you may also start to notice that there's glue coming out from the seam between the quarter round and the 1x2. That's okay. And from here, I'm just gonna go down the line and I'm gonna space my nails about 6 inches apart, 5 or 6 inches apart. Too many nails is bad. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And again, as you're going, you wanna check and make sure that your pieces are staying flush. And if you're noticing that the quarter round is sticking past the 1x2 or vice versa, this is your opportunity to use your fingers to put pressure on the pieces of wood to adjust them and hold them in the right position. And of course, it's a little tricky because you've got to do that while avoiding having the nails shoot too close to your hands. Okay, so there's my nails. And because I'm done using the pneumatic nailer now, I'm gonna make sure that before I leave it on the bench top, I go ahead and I unplug it for safety. And I'm gonna wanna take my hose, wrap it up, and put it back on the hook. The next thing you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna check for excess glue. Like there's a little too much. There's a couple of spots where it's pouring out a little bit. And you want to check the back. And you want to look for problems like nails that have been deflected and shot out of the back of the wood. Now, if that happens, and it probably will happen, see me and I will show you how to get a nail out. But if it does happen, it does not mean you have to start over. It's not the end of the world. It's a relatively easy fix. Now, before we move on to the next step, we should really take a look at what the corners of the stretcher frame look like. Now, this is the back of the stretcher frame. This is a finished stretcher frame. This is actually our mistake stretcher frame from before. But the mistake is on the front, so we can look at the back of it because the back is okay. Now, things that you're gonna notice, you guys will learn about the wood joiner that's here and the masonite triangle that's here. But right now, what you want to really focus on is this angle here. So that is 45 degrees. All 4 of the corners of the stretcher frame meet up at 45 degrees. And your quarter round is up here. Your 1x2 is down here. So that means that you need the cuts that you're going to be doing next with the chop saw to be a very particular way in order to get these pieces to line up correctly. So here's 2 pieces of 1x2 with quarter round attached to them. This piece here, if you were to try to take your stretcher bars after you've cut all 4 bars and attempt to attach them to each other, you're gonna end up with the quarter round side around the inside edge of the stretcher frame, which is not gonna be any good for stretching canvas. This piece here that has the quarter round extending all the way out to the edge, This, when you attach these 45s, you're gonna end up with your quarter round on the outside edge of your stretcher frame. So this is what you're gonna wanna see. You're gonna wanna see the widest part of each of the 4 stretcher bars that you make be the part of the bar that has the quarter round on it.
This is the tool that we're going to be using to do all of those 45-degree angle cuts. This is a sliding compound miter saw. We're going to be putting our wood on this bed, and we're going to be operating the saw and making our cuts.
So the first thing that you're going to notice about the sliding compound miter saw is that it is currently locked. How do you know it's locked? You can see that the blade, which is that big red thing with the teeth on it, right now that's down. And you can see that it's inside of this channel, inside the actual housing of the saw. So when it's in this position, it can't cut. If you were to press and hold the trigger, you could start the motor, but you're just gonna be making noise. So before you can do anything, the first thing you need to do is you need to unlock the saw. And the saw's lock system is a 2-part system. So we're over here on the other side of the saw. This would be the left-hand side of the saw if you're facing it. And you're gonna notice that there's this pin right here. This is part of the lock that is keeping the blade down right now, but you won't be able to operate this by just pulling on it. If you do it now, you can pull and it's not gonna go anywhere. In order to get that to work, you have to press down on the handle. You can see that there's a little bit of play there. So I need to press and hold this down here in order to be able to pull that pin and release the saw. And then it will raise. So now the saw is unlocked, and you can see that you can lay a piece of wood on this bed uninterrupted by the blade being down.
Now that being said, we're not quite ready to roll yet. There is another thing that this saw can do. You heard the name sliding compound miter saw. So it can also slide forward and backward while it's cutting. Now right now it's set up to just cut up and down, which is what we want it to do. But it is possible that when you come up to the saw, somebody has left it unlocked so that it can slide. So I'm going to show you how to lock and unlock the sliding feature on the saw so that you can check and make sure that it's locked, and if it is not locked, you can lock it properly. So just like the safety release for the entire saw is 2-part mechanism, the safety for the sliding feature is also a 2-part mechanism.
One part of the lock is a little bit out of the way. You've got to come all the way over here, and you see this wheel? There's just a small sort of hexagonal wheel there. If you rotate that counterclockwise, that will unlock. Then back on this side of the saw, you're gonna see this chrome bar that goes between these 2 bolts here. If you pull that up this way, it will release. So once that wheel is turned counterclockwise and that lever is pulled up, this whole thing can move forward and backward. Which is cool, but for what we're doing, we don't need the saw to do that. So if you come up to use the saw and it's already set to slide, you're gonna wanna lock it. And of course, you're also gonna wanna check to make sure it's locked every time you use it. So the first thing you wanna do is push this all the way back and take that lever. Now you're gonna notice that if this is all the way back as far as it'll go, the lever won't engage. So it shouldn't be all the way back like this. It has to be forward a bit. and then there's a point where this will engage. And then on the other side, you go over to that little wheel, and now this time you're gonna turn it clockwise. And you're just gonna go as tight as it'll go, and that's locked. So now the saw will move up and down, but it will not move forward and backward this way and that way. So now you're ready to use it. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the piece of 1x2 1/4 round that I just glued and nailed together, and I'm going to put this over on the bed of the sliding compound miter saw, also known as the chop saw. Now notice what I'm doing. I am keeping the curved part of the 1/4 round facing myself. Putting it down like this, so that if you look at the edge of the bed of the chop saw, you've got this curve here, and then you've got this mirroring that. So you've got the tallest part against the fence the whole time. So that when I'm doing these cuts and the blade is coming down, it's gonna be coming in contact with the 1x2 first and the 1/4 round last. All right, so here we are in front of the saw, the chop saw, and here's our lumber that we're gonna cut. And here's what we're going for. Our first cut is gonna do that. So right now you can see our lumber is at 90 degrees. This is 45. So we've got to make a cut on that piece of wood to make it also be 45 degrees. So what you'll notice is the blade is at 90 degrees. How can you tell it's at 90 degrees? It's really hard to tell just by looking. You could even try to guess by the position of this channel because that's parallel to the blade, but even so, it's really not. If it were off by 5 degrees, you probably wouldn't see it. There's an indicator here. There's a small arrow, and you can see that it's pointing at 0 on this gauge. That 0 is 90 degrees. In carpentry tools, they tend to mark 90 degrees as 0, and all of your angles are derived from 90 degrees. So in order to cut that at 45 degrees, I'm gonna need to set this tool to cut at 45 degrees. So there's your 0 for 90. Your 45 is all the way over here. You'll notice that it is not the final stop on this gauge, so you can actually go past 45, so you have to be careful. So in order to change the blade angle here, what I'm gonna need to do is I'm gonna need to use this mechanism on the end of this handle here. And just like the other releases on this tool, it's a 2-part release. So one part is to push up on that knob. The other part is to press and hold this button. So if you just push up on the knob, like when it's locked, it's down like this. If you just push this up, it's not gonna move. But when you press and hold this button in, now it's gonna move. And I'm gonna bring it over to 45. The whole saw is gonna move while you're doing that. So you bring it over to 45. And when you get close to 45, if you let go of the button that you're pressing down, you're gonna notice that when you get to where you need to go, it's gonna actually click in place. So it'll click at 45. And then once it's there, then you wanna lock that handle. So now we're ready to make our first cut. Now, this is where things get a little tricky. So we're gonna be cutting a 45-degree chunk off of the end of this piece of wood with this saw. And when you approach this saw, you're going to need to use one hand to hold down the piece of wood, one hand to operate the saw. So I'm right-handed, and my instinct when I do that is I'm gonna wanna hold the tool with my right hand and the material with my left hand. But if I were to do that, I would end up having to hold this here and operate the saw here.
So as you can see, it's pretty obvious why this would be a terrible idea.
You're also going to notice that on this saw, there are these symbols that have the hand with the slash through it, no hands. That means that you don't want to have your hands over the metal bed of the saw at any point in time. It's okay to hold the wood when you're over, to hold the lumber that you're cutting when you're over the wooden part of the fence, but when you're over this part, that is just a reminder, it's on that side too, that's just a reminder that when you're holding, you don't want to hold, here is okay, you can hold here, but you can't hold here. You're too close because if something goes wrong, that blade is right under this guard and it's too close to your hands. Another thing is that we're just trying at this point to make a 45-degree angle cut at the end of this piece of wood. Every other cut that you do, you're just doing that. So when I line this up to cut, I don't necessarily want to do this here because I'm trying to make a stretcher frame. I have this piece of wood that I just attached the pieces together, and I want to save lumber so I don't have to make more of this. So I'm going to cut off as little as I can. So I want to cut off a small amount like that, not a big amount like that. So your blade is going to land back here. So for what we're doing, we're okay with cutting off just that much, or even a little less.
As far as crossing your arms goes, what you have to actually do is hold the wood with your right hand here and hold it against the fence. And then use the saw with your left hand. So it's a bit counterintuitive, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but you kind of get the hang of it after a while, and then you can go ahead and make your cut. So once you're happy with where everything is, hold the piece of wood firmly against the fence, and at this point you're ready to cut. Now the last thing before you cut is you want to make sure that the blade isn't down like this. You don't want to start the motor while the blade is against the wood. It can actually damage the motor, but also, even if it gets through the cut okay, it will splinter the piece of wood, so you won't get a good cut, you won't get a usable piece of wood. So hold, make sure that the blade is clear of the wood, and then press and hold the trigger, cut down, hit bottom, let go of the trigger, and let the blade stop before you bring it back up. So here's what that looks like.
So the reason why you want to let the blade stop before you finish the cut is because we did a very small cutoff. And when you do a small cutoff like that, what's likely going to happen is that it's going to go flying if you bring the blade back up under power. If you look at this blade, you're going to notice that the teeth on the blade they have a tooth set where one tooth points left and one tooth points right all the way around the blade. And that means that the edge of the saw where the teeth are is actually pretty ragged. So if that comes back up while there's still power to the motor, those teeth can actually just grab a small cutoff and kick it back so it goes flying. But otherwise we have a good cut. So every other cut, that's all you're gonna do. But now what we're gonna need to do is we're gonna need to go down a certain length and make a second cut. But the second cut is going to have to be at 45 degrees, pointing in the opposite direction. Which means that in order to do that, we're going to need to change our blade angle again and switch from the 45 on this side to the 45 on that side. So here's the point where you're probably gonna end up needing your tape measure first. Again, sometimes you need it at the beginning just to double check the length of a piece of stock you wanna use, but really here's the first place you're gonna need it. So at this point, really at the beginning, you should know how much lumber you're gonna need altogether. So if you're doing an 18 by 24 inch canvas, which is what we're doing today, you're going to need the total sum of 2 pieces at 18 inches and 2 pieces at 24 inches to give you your total length. Once you know you have enough lumber for that, accounting for some scrap in between cuts, so always overestimate, then you know how many pieces of 1/4 round and 1x2 you're gonna need. You'll be able to get two 18x24, two 18s and two 24s out of an 8-foot piece with some scrap left over, so you should be fine. The other thing is that now you're gonna need to start measuring and marking on the piece of wood in order to figure out and do your cuts accurately. Convenient way to do this is to do this on the bed of the chop saw. Keep your piece of wood there, bring it back away from the fence a little bit, and take your tape measure, lock it with the tape out so that the length that you want is a couple of inches out of the tape measure. So we're gonna do our 24s. Our 24 is here. And then you can take your marking device, in my case a pencil, go over to the 24 and make a mark on the wood. Now, when you do that, make sure that your mark is easily distinguishable from the nail holes. So you don't want to just make a dot somewhere because it might be hard to tell. So what I usually do is I make a line and I also put it all the way at the top. But I make a line so that I can really tell that it's not a nail. Now, if I get here and I measure out my 24 or whatever that measurement is, and I find that it's going to end up right on top of a nail, then what I'm gonna wanna do is go back to my first cut that I just made and cut a little bit more wood off of it so that my line for my 24 inches does not turn up cutting through a nail. The reason for that is this saw is gonna be throwing a lot of sawdust and it's gonna collect back here in this shroud. The dust collection system in the shop is built in to help kind of collect that dust and get it out of the way. But you end up with a relatively high parts per million of sawdust in this space, and sawdust can be quite flammable. All you need is a spark and you could have a fireball, some kind of fire. We don't want that to happen. So you don't want to cut through nails because they spark. So I've gone ahead and I've changed the blade to point to the other 45-degree angle. And now I'm trying to line up for my cut. My line is up there. I can't exactly tell where the blade is going to land, so I'm going to need to look and see. So I'm going to bring this down and I'm going to look and see where the blade is going to end up relative to my mark. So it's a little bit long of the mark, which means that my piece is going to come out longer than 24. So I'm going to shift it back that way a little bit. Bring that down. We're still a little bit long of the mark. I'm gonna shift it a tiny bit. Now what you're gonna notice is that I am doing this by eye. I can't really tell exactly where that blade is gonna land, but I can get a relatively good idea. You just have to kind of learn how to trust your instinct on that. They make laser systems for these saws, but often they only turn on when you press and hold the trigger, which isn't really particularly helpful when you're trying to do this fine alignment stuff. So we don't bother with them. Just trust your instinct to line it up by eye. And basically you want to look in between the fence and this side of the blade. There's the spot that you want to be looking at. So now with the 45 on this side, I'm more comfortable because, again, as a right-hander, it's much more comfortable for me to hold the wood with my left hand and use the saw with my right. So I'm going to do essentially the same thing I did before. I'm going to press and hold the wood here, make sure that the saw is free of my wood before I start cutting. Press and hold the trigger, and then cut. And this time, because I made a bigger cut, I don't need to leave the blade down until it stops.
because these two pieces of wood that I've just cut are too heavy to get thrown by the kickback. Generally, it's probably not a bad habit to just leave the blade down at the end of every cut.
So this is what a good stretcher bar should look like. 45-degree angle cuts on both ends, and the widest part should be the part with the quarter round. And also, the curved surface of the quarter round should be facing towards you. So the profile will be like that. So now I'm gonna need one more of this, these are 24s, and 2 18s. And I will just point out and remind you guys that every other cut, you do not need to measure. You just need to cut off a small piece, because your triangle, or your 45-degree angle in this case, this is not the angle we want. This angle's wrong. But this is our final, our cutoff from our previous cut. And it should look like that. So in order to do that, all we have to do is make a 45-degree angle cut that way and just knock a small bit off the end. So you change the blade back to this 45 over here, and you line it up and you just make a small cut. So every other cut, there's no measuring. You just change the blade angle and cut. So every other cut, you're cutting off a small triangle. You don't need to measure for it. And then for the opposite end, there's a little time saver after your first cut. So your first piece that's the same length, you know, you're doing them in pairs. The first one, you're gonna need to use your tape measure and mark. Once you have one piece that's the correct length though, you can take two pieces, you can take the piece you just cut and put it against the other piece of wood you're getting ready to cut. And you can take your pencil and you can make a mark. And again, differentiate your mark from your nails. It just saves you the time of having to get out the tape measure. So you're gonna end up with 4 pieces of stretcher frame. And what I've done here is I've laid them back to back so that I can make sure that they are the same length. Now, if there's a variance of as much as maybe, I don't know, even 1/8 of an inch, you could probably get away with still making a canvas out of that. But on the contrary, you could also just retrim your pieces to get them all to the same length. You can cut really, really thin cuts with the chop saw. So even if you had to just resaw a tiny amount, a 1/16 of an inch or something like that off, you can definitely line up again and just resaw and get them as accurate as you want. So from there, I'm gonna take all of my pieces and I'm gonna lay them back out on one of the workbenches. And you're gonna notice that we have kind of a different toolkit for the next couple of steps. So we've got our glue bottle, we've got a box of nails, we've got a box of this other kind of hardware here called wood joiners. And we've got the brown masonite triangles. We also have an L square and we have a hammer. You're also gonna notice that I went ahead and took the 4 pieces that we just cut and I laid them out in the correct positions to build the stretcher frame. The other thing that you wanna do is you wanna take your pieces and do what's called the dry fit, where you put them all together and you use your L square and you're gonna wanna check if there's any particular configuration where these pieces of wood wanna fit together particularly well or where they don't fit particularly well. Because it's wood, it's organic. Even though we picked straight lumber and we did all of our cuts correctly and our angles are good, there's also still the possibility that something is just not gonna line up right. So play with the relative positions of the pieces until you're positive that you've got them lining up the way you want them to. And use the L square as a reference so that you've at least got one angle that you know is 90 degrees and it will make it easier to do things. And once you're happy with the position of the 4 pieces, then we're going to start to attach them to each other. So the first important thing of note is that from this point on, when we start attaching pieces together, this is going to be the last chance you're going to have to put them together. So you're going to want to make sure that you have glue everywhere anything is going to touch anything else. So anywhere pieces meet up, you're going to want to put glue. Now first we're going to work on the connection between these two pieces here. And we're going to be putting our masonite triangles here. So what I'm going to want to do is put some glue here on the edge where these two pieces are going to meet up. Not a ton, again, same as before. And I'm going to want to put some glue up on top here because the masonite triangle is going to go here. So I want to take some glue and put it here, but again, not a ton. And then I'm going to go ahead and take the masonite triangle and I'm going to press it down so that the wood glue that's behind it will spread out and create a little bit of suction and hold everything together. The other thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to leave a little bit of space right back here between the masonite triangle and the quarter round. The reason for that is that when you're working on these, if you start assembling and you put your masonite triangle all the way in the corner, it's sitting on top of the glue and you're putting nails through this, it can actually push your corner open. And once it's nailed down and there's the glue there, you might have trouble being able to close the corner again. So when you start doing this, if you set the masonite triangle in a little bit and you give yourself a little bit of wiggle room on the back here, you have room for the masonite triangle to move around as you're hammering, and you don't have to worry about it causing a gap in the corner. So once I'm happy with the corner, I'm going to go ahead and attach this with nails. Now, why am I using nails and a hammer instead of the pneumatic nailer? For a couple of reasons. The first one is that the pneumatic nailer's nails are 1 inch and the 1x2 isn't actually 1x2. It's 3/4 of an inch by 1 3/4. So it's short of the full 1 inch, meaning that when you shoot the nails through, you're probably going to nail the wood to the table. The other problem is that masonite triangles are actually pretty flimsy. They're basically a paper product just impregnated with a glue to hold them together. And the nails from the pneumatic nailer don't have heads, so oftentimes they'll just shoot straight through the masonite triangle and not really hold them in place. So the nails that we're going to use, we're hammering, and they also have heads on them so that they'll actually hold the masonite triangle down. So you want to take a nail and hold it in place. You want to make good use of your L square here because the L square is going to help hold the pieces of wood and keep them from moving around too much. And you want to place your nail, tap it down so that it can't move anymore, and then double check your corner. You kind of cannot over check your corners. Like, it's okay to be obsessive compulsive about the corners. The corners are going to be in direct contact with the canvas that we're going to stretch over this thing. And if the corners are jagged, they could just tear your canvas. So you tap the nail in just a little bit so that it stands up on its own, and then you free up your hand so that you can hold both of your stretcher bars and your masonite triangle. And you can, if you do this the same way I'm doing it, you can also hold the L square and press it against the wood to keep everything from moving around too much. And then you take your hammer. Make sure you're holding the hammer from the back. Don't hold the hammer here and hit down like this. Use gravity. Hold the hammer back in the back here where it's designed to be held. Then take another nail. Same deal. Tap it so that it stands up on its own. Then hold everything together. If the nail bends while you're hammering, but it's already gone into the piece of 1x2,
Don't worry about it, just hammer it flat, let it be. If it bends right away, then you're gonna wanna pull it out with a pair of pliers and start it over. And you're gonna wanna basically just put 4 nails total. So you're gonna end up with that. That's what it should look like. The corner should be pretty tight, and you should have 2 nails in each stretcher bar. And you've already done a dry fit, so you don't have to worry about accidentally nailing 2 short legs or 2 long legs together. So after I've attached the 2 first pieces together, what I like to do is take all 4 stretcher frames and rotate them around so that I can then attach the 2 diagonal opposite legs to each other. That's just gonna help me get a better fit when I have to join the other 2 corners up. So at this point, I'm gonna basically do exactly what I just did with the other 2 stretcher bars. So there we've got our 2 diagonally opposite corners nailed together. We've used our L-square so that everything stays at the right angles. So we've got pretty much 90 degrees on both. And this is our final opportunity to glue both of the other 2 corners, because now that these pieces are attached to each other, you're not gonna be able to glue one without doing the other, because you won't be able to get them apart to get in and get the glue bottle in there. So we'll glue them, we'll glue both of those diagonal opposite corners, and then we'll do our Masonite triangles the same way. So if everything goes swimmingly by the time you get your Masonite triangles on these other 2 corners, they'll all line up pretty nicely, and you'll be able to just do your nails the same way as you did the other 2. But it is possible that when you get here, you end up with a problem, something like that, where pieces don't line up right. The way you want to handle that is just to do one of the corners, focus on one and get it right. You'll be able to do that even if it causes malalignment in the other corner that makes it even worse than it might have been when you first noticed it. That's okay, because once you get the one corner, then you can use different types of tools like right angle clamps and sanding techniques and resawing, etc., to fix that last corner if you need to. It's not terribly complicated to do. So, but we got lucky and everything lined up pretty well, so we can go ahead and nail these Masonite corners down. So there we've got the finished front. So this is the front. This is going to be the part that the canvas is going to be suspended over. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to start adding reinforcement in order to make this stronger. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this and flip it. And we don't need the L-square anymore. What you're going to notice is that on the back, the corners look pretty good, but there's actually still some play in them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take wood joiners and we are going to put them in these corners. Now the wood joiner is designed to pull the corner shut. The legs have very, very sharp spikes and they're tilted diagonally so that when they're driven into the corner, they pull the 2 pieces of wood together. Be very careful handling these and put them diagonally across the corner. You can put them dead center or you can put them in a little bit. I've started to put them further down because when you do this and not dead across the center, it gives you a little bit more room to staple the canvas later. So it seems to work out a little better to put them down here. And the way you have to hammer these is you can't just hammer one side down because it's just gonna make it go flat. You're gonna have to alternate hammer blows. Hammer here, 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 until you drive it flat. Basically that, and get it as flat as you can, and do that to all 4 of the corners. I usually just kind of get used to the whole diagonal opposite corner thing because you end up having to sort of handle and move the canvas around that way as you're doing different steps. So. But the order that you do these in doesn't really matter. So this is what you should end up with. They should be pretty flush. So the last thing that we need to do to these stretcher bars before they're ready for canvas is we want to put a little bit of additional supports into the corners. So we're going to put some nails through, one this way and one this way. In order to do that, we're going to use the big nailers with the shortest nails for the big nailers. So here's one of the big nailers. It's similar to the small nailers, but they load a little bit differently, and we have a few different models. I'm gonna show you guys how to load one in the video, and when you guys actually use the different ones the first time, you can just ask me and I'll show you how to load them. So right now, this thing is empty, and first of all, this is your safety. And unlike the small nailer that has the safety ahead of where the nail shoots from the middle of the safety. So it actually shoots right out of there. So the next thing is that there's a leaf spring in here, which is basically just a coiled up flat strip of metal. And this whole thing here pushes the nails forward. So the first step to unlocking this is to pull here and lock it. You pull it all the way to the back and it'll lock back here. So the next thing you'll notice is that there's a channel right in here. So you're gonna wanna take your nails with the heads facing up that way, and you're gonna wanna stick them right in here, right in that channel there. Then hold this tab so that if you release it, it doesn't just shoot forward. So hold this tab, press this laterally this way, and then assist it forward. So now this is pushing forward and feeding the nails towards the front of the nailer. And that's how you load it. So we were talking before about using nailers safely and the idea of shooting nails so that they're pointing at people or pointing towards your face and such. We want to put these nails in these corners, but you'll notice that if I were to try to do that on this bench top, I'm going to have to be holding the nailer really close to my face. So what I like to do is actually put the stretcher frame on the floor and shoot the nails into it that way. So you take your stretcher frame, you hold your nailer. You don't want to hold it here because you're pointing the nailer towards your hand. So you want to hold it back here like this. And you're aiming for the center of the vertical bar. And when you shoot these nails, the big nailer is going to shoot a puff of air out of the vent on the top. Just warning you about that. Make sure you have your safety glasses on and be ready. Oftentimes people will ask, what do you do if you get the nails to strike each other? It's actually pretty rare, but if you do, you can use a pair of pliers and pull the nail out. So I'm done with the nailer, so I can unplug it. And what's often going to happen with these corners is that the nails are going to be sticking up a little bit. You can see how they're kind of sticking out a little bit. So I'm going to need to hammer them flat. But I don't want to just take a hammer and just strike the sides of the stretcher bars because I'm probably going to just dent them. So I'm going to do, there's a little trick you can do for that. So there's this thing called the nail set that lives up on the same shelf with all the other tools, the hand tools, above the nailers. The nail set looks kind of like a metal crayon, and the end of it, it has a small indentation that will fit right over your nail head.
and you're gonna hold that over the nail and then take your hammer and hammer that so that way you don't have to worry about accidentally denting the wood. So I'm just gonna basically go around and do all of the nails because they will probably all be sticking out. Now, if you overdo it or you slip with the nail set and you drive the nail too far or you just make a big divot in the wood, that's completely okay. It's small enough that you'll never see it underneath the canvas when you stretch your canvas. So this is the completed stretcher frame, and you've got your masonite triangles on the front. You've got your wood joiners on the back. So that's the back. And you've got nails in every corner. Now, if you've done this correctly, when you look at the corner, you should see a friendly robot shark face. Okay, so we are ready to start stretching our canvas. So when you guys first come in to start making your stretcher frames, I will ask you what size stretcher frame you're making and I will cut your canvas. So you'll already have this. You're gonna wanna lay the canvas on the bench top. Now, disclaimer, this is the sculpture shop, so it is dirty, messy. You wanna make sure that you inspect the bench top so that there is no crud on it that you don't want getting on your canvas. And then put your canvas down first, and then put your stretcher frame face down on top of it. So we know that the bottom is facing up right now because the bottom is the part that has the wood joiners on it. The next thing we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna wanna align the stretcher frame to the canvas. When we do this, we wanna line up to the weave of the canvas, not necessarily the shape of the canvas, because the canvas is going to be hand torn, so it's possible that it's not 100% square, but you can see the weave pattern, and you just want to make sure that your stretcher bars are parallel to that weave pattern so that when we stretch the canvas, it's going to be getting tension to spread evenly. So now we're going to talk about the last of the pneumatic tools that we're going to be using for this process, and this is the pneumatic stapler. So the pneumatic stapler is pretty similar to the small nailers, but you'll notice that it's got a big, wide, flat part at the bottom. You'll also notice that the part behind the safety, which is this little guy right on the end, is your safety. Right behind the safety is a wider channel than the channel that the nails shoot out of. So those are your clues that you're holding your stapler. Now I want to check to see if there's nails in it. Now, when I do this, I don't want to face it this way because if there are nails in it, if there are staples in it, they're just going to fall on the floor. So I'm going to want to press and hold here, flip it this way, press and hold here and pull this back. That's where your staples go. Some people put them back here. That's not where they go. They go in here. So you put them in with the feet facing up and you make sure that they go all the way to the bottom. And then you push that forward and you're loaded. So there is a correct pattern for stapling a canvas down. The first thing that we want to do is going to be that we're just going to fold our canvas over and we're going to put a staple here. We're going to go diagonally opposite, do the same thing there. Then we're going to do one in each side. So first, we're just going to put in 4 staples right in the centers on all 4 sides. And for the first and the third, one that you do, you just need to fold the canvas over and put the staple in because there's no staple opposite yet, so there's no tension that you need to apply. As far as applying tension, I will show you guys what proper tension looks like in just a second. Okay, so proper tension. Canvas tension is very subjective, and different people will prefer their canvases to be either tighter or looser depending on what you're going for. But a good idea of what tension should be is what I would call just sort of a medium firm tension, which would be, there's a staple that's already in on the opposite end, so there's something to pull against. So I'm going to fold the canvas over the stretcher bar, and I'm going to pull with my fingers, and with my thumb and forefinger, I'm going to pull the canvas this way. With my other 3 fingers, I'm going to push against the stretcher frame. So I'm going to kind of squish everything together like that. And you're going to notice that there is a sharp line visible top and bottom, and that in the middle there's no bulging. If you've done that, you're using what I would describe as a firm medium tension, which is more than sufficient. And once you have that, you hold it, and then you take your your stapler, and you pop a staple in. So that's what you should end up with. So now I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to put more staples, first one in each center of each of the 4 stretcher bars. It's going to look like when you've completed basically step 1 of canvas stretching, which is just 1 staple in the center of each of the 4 stretcher bars. And from this point on, I'm just going to kind of work my way around the canvas, but I'm going to do that in a very particular way. I'm going to start from the middle to this corner here. Then I'm going to go diagonally opposite to that corner there. From the middle, that way. And I'm going to do the same thing for the sides. From the center, that way. Center, that way. So first you're going to do 1/4 diagonal opposites. Then I'm going to go back and do the same thing on the other side. So from the middle there, middle there, middle there, middle there. And I want to stop a little ways away from the corners because I want to leave myself a little bit of room to staple the corners when I get to them. So I'm going to staple up to maybe about that close. So that is what I'm going to do now. So as I'm pulling, I'm going to pull diagonally so that I can get any bunching and kind of try to get it to coax it over to the corner, which I would rather have a little bit of extra fabric in the corner. It makes it easier to fold them rather than just pulling straight in this way. So I'm going to pull diagonally. And I'm not going to go crazy on the number of staples. I'm going to space them about 3 inches or so apart. Now there are tools that some people use to stretch canvases, canvas pliers. I don't recommend them on small canvases, it's easy to overdo it. But when you work on particularly large canvases, they become increasingly necessary unless you really are about the struggle of using incredible, impressive hand strength to do it unaided. You can do that, but it's not necessary. The other sort of general rule of thumb I would say is that you want your staples to be in a line and parallel to the stretcher bars, not diagonal, because that can cause sort of wrinkles and lumps and bunching in the canvas that might make the canvas not stretch properly. So this is what it should look like when you've done step 2. You're going to have staples roughly 2-3 inches apart, not a ton, and you should still have your corners with plenty of extra fabric so that you can fold the corner.
So folding the corner, they're kind of similarly to the tension. It's subjective. There's a lot of different ways to do it. A basic corner fold is to just crease the corner, fold it over the corner like this, fold down, and then if this stays flat and doesn't stick out, leave it like that and staple the whole thing down, or you can fold it in this way. That's a basic corner. You could go a little bit past that if you want something slightly more tidy. And what you can do instead is do your crease, open the corner, tuck the same triangle that you were going to fold there, but tuck it into the corner. And then lay that flat on top, and then the other piece of canvas, lay it over. So that's just basically going to leave you a tidier corner where there's just a crease. There's still a diagonal, but it's more just visible through the canvas. There's fabric over it, so it just makes the corner look neater. One thing to think about when you're doing your corners is, what do you already know the orientation that the canvas is ultimately going to be used in? You could choose to have any folds be on the top and bottom of your canvas rather than on the sides, so that when it's on the wall, your folding isn't drawing the attention of the viewer. So if you're doing a painting that was going to be portrait orientation, you would want to fold this way so that your folds are going to turn up on the top and bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and staple one of these down. So I'm going to do the same corner I just did. So I'm going to crease, open the corner, stuff the fold into the corner. You can also play around a little bit here with where exactly you want the fold to end up. So I want it right on the edge. So flatten it down and then go over with the other piece. And now I'm going to put my thumb here. I can feel the wood joiner here. My thumb's on top of the wood joiner, and I have room here to staple. So I'm going to go ahead and hold that down. And put a couple staples in it. So there's your corner. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that for all four. So I've done my corners, and I have a finished canvas. I have my folds neatly tucked away. I have nice clean vertical sides, and I have a decent amount of bounce on this canvas. Now, before you get ready to paint on here, there's another step that will happen, which is gessoing. You will learn gessoing in your classroom, and again, there are also different approaches to doing that. And the other thing is that when you gesso, the gesso itself will make the canvas fibers contract. So the canvas will get tighter. So that's something to keep in mind as far as setting the tension for your canvases when you stretch them. So hopefully this has been informative. If you guys need any assistance at any point, feel free to ask me. And good luck and enjoy making canvases.